Welcome to the deep dive. Really glad you could join us. You've given us a fantastic overview of what's happening globally, and honestly, I can't wait to get into it with you.
Yeah.
Okay, let's unpack this. We're doing a deep dive today based on this really comprehensive snapshot you shared. Global affairs, space news, economic updates, all right up to June 26th, 2025. So our mission, as always, is to sift through all this info, pull out the key pieces, connect the dots, and hopefully give you a clearer picture of the big trends shaping things right now.
Absolutely. And what's fascinating here, I think, is just how interconnected everything is. It's like a huge web, and we want to help trace those connections and figure out, what it actually means.
Exactly. And speaking of connections reaching high, let's kick things off with the cosmic frontier, a new era in space. There's just so much going on up there, but Axiom Mission 4, AX4, really feels like a big signpost. This isn't your typical NASA mission, right? It's private, but with, huge global implications.
That's right. It's a commercial flight, but NASA's backing it.
So, the launch itself, SpaceX Falcon 9, June 25th, super early, 2:31 a.m. Eastern, from LC-39A, historic pad.
Yeah, the Apollo pad. And it sent the Crew Dragon Grace capsule up to the ISS.
And the crew, this is really interesting, Peggy Whitson, total veteran, is commanding. But joining her are astronauts from India, Poland, and Hungary. Shubhanshu Shukla, Sovoz Uznayiski-Wisniewski, and Tibor Kapu.
First time in, over 40 years for those nations to have citizens on the ISS?
Yeah, over 4 decades. They docked June 26th to the Harmony module up top, basically. And they've got a packed schedule.
Around 60 experiments planned, I saw?
Exactly, 60. Across biology, material science, Earth observation, even outreach stuff, all squeezed into 14 days.
And several of those are specifically from Indian researchers, guided by ISRO.
Right, 7 Indian experiments. It really underlines this as a big commercial step. It's part of Axiom's larger plan, isn't it? Building their own commercial station.
Precisely. Using these missions to build experience and eventually attach their own modules, potentially even using parts of the ISS later on. It's a stepping stone.
And the capsule itself, Crew Dragon Grace. It's brand new, first flight. And apparently the last Crew Dragon, too, they're building.
Yeah, the 5th and final one. So if we connect this to the bigger picture,
Yeah.
AX4 really underscores this rise of private-public partnerships in space. It's also a huge boost for global STEM inspiration, especially in India, Poland, Hungary. And for India, it significantly strengthens their scientific reputation and, crucially, their commercial space footprint.
It feels less like just governments doing space and more like, a global enterprise now.
Exactly. It's changing the landscape.
So beyond people in space, what about the infrastructure, the satellites connecting us?
Right, because that's expanding incredibly fast, too.
Like SpaceX, right? Another Starlink launch just happened, June 25th.
Yep. A Falcon 9 launched 27 of the Starlink V2 mini satellites. That was Starlink 1016 from the Cape.
And the booster, B1080, landed again, its 20th flight.
20th. That reusability is just, routine now, but still amazing. It drives down costs and increases launch frequency massively.
And it's not just SpaceX pushing for this global broadband, right? Yeah. Amazon's Kuiper is in the mix, too.
Absolutely. Just a few days before that Starlink launch, on June 22nd, ULA United Launch Alliance, they launched an Atlas V.
Okay.
And that carried Amazon's Kuiper 2 satellites into low Earth orbit. They're both racing to build out these huge constellations, partly because of regulatory deadlines.
So it's a real push for global connectivity from space.
Definitely. This rapid infrastructure build-out is aiming for, high-speed internet pretty much anywhere. Big deal for remote areas, global business, everything.
Okay. So we're getting better connected. What about the science? Pushing the boundaries of exploration, any big breakthroughs or cool projects come up?
Oh, yeah, definitely. There was a key engine test recently. NASA and L3 Harris hot-fired a new RS-25 engine.
The big ones for the SLS moon rocket.
That's the one. They pushed it to 111% thrust, which is pretty powerful. This paves the way for the 5th SLS launch for the Artemis program.
And they mentioned cost savings, too.
Yeah, about 30% reduction, they reckon, thanks to modern manufacturing techniques. Which is crucial for these big programs.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
And then looking further out, the Vera Rubin Observatory.
Huge news. It captured its first deep sky images. This thing has the world's largest digital camera.
Wow.
Its main job is hunting for dark matter and mapping the universe like never before. So getting those first images is a massive milestone.
Incredible. What else is in the pipeline?
Well, there's the SMILE mission. That's a joint project between China and the European Space Agency, ESA.
Okay.
It's set for launch, maybe Q3 this year, 2025, on a Vega C rocket. It's going to study how the solar wind interacts with Earth's magnetosphere, important for space weather.
Right, and Europa Clipper.
That's already on its way, heading to Jupiter's icy moon Europa. It won't start its main science flybys until April 2030, but it's en route, searching for potential signs of, habitability or even life.
Amazing. So much long-term science.
And don't forget the smaller scale stuff inspiring the next generation. NASA's Wallops facility has a student-led sounding rocket launch happening today, part of the Rock-On program.
That's great to hear. And Axiom's already prepping for Ax-5.
Yep, they're targeting no earlier than May 2026 for that one. The commercial cadence is picking up.
So summing up the space part, these projects promise some serious breakthroughs, right? Space weather, dark matter, maybe even finding hints of life on other worlds.
Exactly. It's a really dynamic period for space science and exploration, driven by both national agencies and these growing commercial players.
Okay, let's bring it back down to Earth then and navigate the much messier world of the geopolitical chessboard. Conflicts, alliances, and domestic shifts. And this first one, the recent Israel-Iran situation. This is where it gets really complex.
Extremely complex, and the source material highlights a fascinating and frankly quite concerning aspect, the move towards hybrid warfare.
Yeah, tell us about that. The reports describe this, this covert operation before the main strikes.
Right. Israeli Mossad agents reportedly smuggled drone components into Iran, assembled them near critical sites, and used them to disable a significant number of missile launchers and air defense systems.
The numbers were stark, reducing potential retaliatory launches from maybe 1,000 down to around 200.
Something like that, according to the sources. This happened before Israel's main aerial strikes between June 13th and 15th. It's a preemptive, hybrid approach.
Then things escalated further. The U.S. Air Force struck Iranian nuclear facilities on June 21st.
Correct. And Iran responded on the 23rd, firing missiles at the Al Udeid Air Base in Qatar, where U.S. forces are based.
But, and this seems key, they deliberately avoided causing casualties.
That apparent restraint, whether deliberate or not, seemed to open the door for diplomacy. The U.S. and Qatar mediated, and a ceasefire was announced on June 24th.
Okay, a ceasefire. But how stable is it? Because Iran then pulled back from IAEA cooperation.
Exactly. On June 25th and 26th, Iran's Parliament and Guardian Council suspended cooperation with the UN's nuclear watchdog. That's a major concern.
And the rhetoric is still pretty heated. Khamenei called the U.S. strike a heavy slap and vowed more attacks on U.S. bases.
Yes, the rhetoric remains highly confrontational. So this whole episode raises a really important question about the implications of this hybrid warfare model. It's this blend of covert action and overt military strikes. And clearly, regional tensions are still incredibly high. Iran stepping back from the IAEA, Khamenei's warnings. It all suggests the ceasefire is, extremely fragile.
So its survival depends on diplomacy and deterrence working hand in hand.
Pretty much. And, just to reiterate, we're relaying the information and dynamics described in the sources here, trying to present the sequence of events and statements neutrally.
Understood. That clarity is vital. Okay, let's shift from that conflict zone to alliances. The NATO summit in The Hague on June 24th, 25th sounds like it was pretty significant.
Very significant. The headline commitment was huge, raising military spending across the alliance to 5% of GDP by 2035.
5%, that's a massive increase for most members.
It's historic. It signals a major strategic shift. They also, of course, reaffirmed Article 5, the Collective Defense Clause, pledged ongoing support for Ukraine, and explicitly named Russia as a long-term threat.
And there was some key diplomacy on the sidelines, too. President Trump meeting with Turkey's Erdogan and Ukraine's Zelensky.
Yes, positioning the U.S. both as a core part of the deterrence posture, but also as a central diplomatic actor.
So what's the bigger picture takeaway from this NATO summit?
Well, what's fascinating, I think, is how clearly this signals a Western strategic pivot. They're gearing up budgetarily and rhetorically for what they see as an era of great power competition.
But the commitment is one thing, delivery is another.
Exactly. The real test will be how quickly and how fully member states actually meet these ambitious spending targets. That will determine NATO's credibility and cohesion moving forward.
And this connects to broader European moves, too, right?
Yeah.
EU leaders were coordinating on Russia sanctions and U.S. tariffs.
Right. There's a wider effort towards alignment, even if there are internal debates, particularly on the economic front with potential U.S. tariffs.
These big international shifts often echo in domestic politics, which brings us to Thailand's political crisis.
Yes, a reminder that internal stability is often precarious.
What happened there? A leaked phone call.
Apparently so. A leaked call led to a major coalition partner, the Bumjantai Party, pulling out of Prime Minister Patomtan Shinawatра's government on June 18th.
And that immediately destabilizes things.
Absolutely. It threatens the government's majority, potentially leading to gridlock or even triggering new elections.
And this is happening alongside other issues. Senate election problems, border tensions.
Yes. Ongoing domestic pressures just add to the instability. There are controversies around the recent Senate election process and reported tensions along the border with Cambodia.
So it sounds like a continuation of Thailand's somewhat volatile political scene.
Unfortunately, yes. It highlights the challenges of maintaining stable coalition governments there, making consistent policymaking quite difficult.
Okay, so we have geopolitical tensions, shifting alliances, domestic instability. What does this complex picture mean for the economy? Let's dive into economic currents, markets, policy, and worker wages, starting with the U.S. markets and that dollar weakness.
Right, a really interesting dynamic playing out there.
On the one hand, markets seem strong, S&P 500 near record highs, driven by AI.
Yeah, the AI boom, particularly around NVIDIA, has been a huge factor. NVIDIA's valuation hitting, $3.77 trillion, briefly overtaking Microsoft. Incredible numbers.
But then there's this tension with the Fed. President Trump criticizing Fed Chair Powell very publicly.
Yes, openly pressuring for interest rate cuts. And that had an immediate significant impact on the currency markets.
The U.S. dollar weakened sharply.
Dramatically. The sources mention the largest mid-year drop since 1973, plunging over 10% since the start of the year.
Wow. And other currencies strengthened?
Exactly. The euro, the British pound, the Swiss franc all gained against the dollar. And global stock markets outside the U.S. perhaps also hit record highs, possibly benefiting from that weaker dollar.
And there's uncertainty about Powell's future. Trump considering replacements.
Reports suggest he's evaluating potential replacements like Kevin Warsh or Kevin Hassett, possibly by the autumn. So add policy uncertainty to the mix.
So what's the takeaway here? It feels like a mix of boom and bust potential.
Well, what's fascinating is this interplay. You have the underlying strength, especially in tech and AI, providing upside. But overlay that with geopolitical instability and this very real uncertainty around Fed policy and leadership.
Yeah.
It creates vulnerability. A policy misstep or continued pressure on the Fed could easily destabilize things. It reflects a U.S. financial landscape that's definitely in flux, and the dollar weakness has global ripple effects.
Okay, let's cross the pond to the UK. Another economic story with political dimensions, the labor welfare bill controversy.
Yes, showing internal party divisions can be just as impactful as inter-party ones.
What was the core issue? A rebellion within the Labour Party.
Over 120 Labour MPs voted against, or abstained on, Prime Minister Starmer's welfare reform bill. The key sticking point was planned cuts to PIP personal independence payment.
That's a benefit for disabled people, right?
Correct. So cutting it caused significant backlash within his own party.
So what's the likely outcome? Will Starmer back down?
It seems likely he'll have to soften the proposals to get the bill through without relying on opposition votes, although some conservatives might offer conditional support if the measures remain tough.
This raises an important question, doesn't it, about Labour's internal cohesion?
Absolutely. It signals real discord. It tests Starmer's leadership and the party's ability to balance, their image of social compassion with arguments about economic prudence, especially as they look towards future elections. It's a tricky balancing act.
Indeed. And just quickly, a local Canadian note, the Toronto wage update for Ontario's forest firefighters.
Right, a specific but important labor issue.
They've been reclassified now called resource technicians and got a $3 per hour pay bump, but the overall negotiations aren't settled yet.
Shows those sector-specific labor adjustments are always ongoing.
Okay, moving from the economy to broader societal issues. Let's look at social and environmental imperatives. Global progress and challenges. First, June 26 was the International Day Against Drug Abuse.
Yes, an important annual focus.
And the 2025 UN theme.
Yeah.
Breaking the chains, treatment, prevention, and recovery for all. Sounds like a push for better support systems.
Exactly. It stresses improving access to rehabilitation and integrating support services worldwide. It's about a holistic public health approach.
Which highlights that ongoing global commitment even amidst everything else.
Precisely. These fundamental public health challenges require constant collaborative effort.
Now, on the environmental front, particularly corporate responsibility, what's happening with fashion industry carbon reporting?
This is interesting. The CCRM Initiative Carbon Reporting and Measurement just released new climate reporting matrices tailored for specific sectors: tech, agri-food, and fashion. The detailed findings for the big fashion companies, Adidas, H&M, Lululemon, and others, are due out in early July, with analysis on potential solutions following mid-month.
So what's the significance of this? More transparency?
Exactly. What's fascinating here is that it signals a serious, growing push for transparency and, crucially, accountability in the fashion industry's climate commitments. It's been a sector facing a lot of scrutiny.
And hopefully it drives real change. Looking more broadly at climate change and indigenous partnerships, there are some worrying signs, but also positive initiatives.
A mixed bag, definitely. The World Meteorological Organization, the WMO, put out a stark warning about Asia.
Warming faster than the global average.
Nearly twice as fast, they say, and that's directly fueling more extreme weather. Heat waves, floods, stronger cyclones, faster glacier melt. The impacts are already severe.
But alongside that, we see efforts like Prince William's initiative.
Yes, he hosted a climate roundtable at St. James's Palace. A key focus was emphasizing partnerships with indigenous communities in conservation efforts.
Why is that significant?
It underlines the interconnectedness of environmental protection, biodiversity loss, and the rights and knowledge of indigenous peoples. It's a growing recognition of their vital role.
Still, there are background concerns about international cooperation, right? Legal norms eroding.
Some analysts are definitely raising flags. They point to challenges in enforcing international treaties and holding nations accountable, especially on climate. Some experts are even calling for reforms, perhaps using new climate-specific legal frameworks.
So the momentum for climate action is there, but the structures might need strengthening.
That seems to be the tension. There's diplomatic momentum and growing awareness, but also this urgent need for more effective global collaboration and potentially new governance approaches to match the scale of the challenge.
Okay, let's end this section on a more positive public health note. Tobacco control in India.
Yes, a genuine success story highlighted by the WHO.
Their latest Global Tobacco Epidemic Report for 2025 specifically recognizes India.
It does, for two key things: implementing best practice graphic warnings on tobacco packaging, which are very impactful, and for being part of a major global initiative aimed at strengthening tobacco control measures.
That's great. It shows that targeted public health policies can work on a massive scale.
Absolutely. It's a powerful example of successful intervention reducing harm and saving lives.
Okay, nearly there. Just a couple of quick noteworthy trends before we get to the bottom line. Tech and infrastructure snippets.
Right, important foundational elements.
First, cybersecurity skills. Students from the University of Scranton did really well in an international cybercrime competition in Spain.
Yes, they took top honors, which is encouraging, shows talent development in a critical field.
And subsea cables, the backbone of the internet. Indonesia is boosting training.
Their Communications and Digital Affairs Ministry is pushing cross-sector training to build up the workforce needed to maintain and expand their subsea cable infrastructure, vital for national and regional connectivity.
So these connect to those bigger themes of digital infrastructure and skills for the future.
Definitely. Foundational work that underpins so much of the modern economy and society.
All right, so we've covered a lot of ground. Space, geopolitics, economics, social issues, tech. If we try to synthesize this, pull it all together, what are the main currents you see?
Okay, the bottom line from this deep dive, I think, highlights three core takeaways. First, geopolitical tensions are absolutely central right now. The Israel-Iran situation is incredibly fragile, and we see this coordinated yet still somewhat cautious Western response to Russia and the Middle East playing out via NATO and EU actions.
Okay, tensions are key. What else?
Second, a significant economic recalibration is happening. The U.S. financial scene is shifting, driven by that Fed controversy and the resulting weak dollar. This isn't just a U.S. story. It's causing ripple effects and forcing market adjustments globally.
Got it. Tensions and economic shifts. Is there any good news?
Yes, absolutely. The third point is that despite all these challenges, there is real, tangible, global progress. We see it in the ambition and achievements in space exploration, both public and private. We see it in successful public health campaigns like India's tobacco control. And we see continued, albeit complex, momentum in climate diplomacy and environmental awareness.
So a world grappling with tension and change, but also pushing forward in key areas. It really shows how interconnected everything is.
It truly does. The links between a drone strike in the Middle East, a currency fluctuation driven by Fed policy, and a satellite launch aiming to connect remote villages are all part of this intricate global dynamic.
What an incredible amount to process. Thank you for walking us through all of that.
My pleasure. Now, here's something to leave you thinking about. Given the incredible pace and interconnectedness of these global shifts we've unpacked today, from commercial space stations changing who gets to orbit, to the subtleties of hybrid warfare reshaping conflict, and these major market recalibrations altering economic landscapes, what singular aspect of this evolving world do you believe holds the greatest potential for unexpected change in the coming year, and why?
Ooh, that is a fantastic question to chew on. A real challenge. And on that note, we'll wrap up this deep dive. Thanks so much for joining us, for bringing your curiosity, and for letting us explore this complex world together. Keep questioning, keep exploring, and we'll catch you on the next deep dive.